time to play ball. Welcome to the podcast with no limits. Whether it be sports, current events, or random thoughts, this is the place to step in and stay a while. Your host is a proud alumnus of Rio Hondo Prep, a former minor league baseball umpire, and a man with strong opinions. Welcome to the Get Home Safe podcast and your host, Matt Hersema.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Get Home Safe. Happy Friday to everyone. Hopefully everyone's week has been going well, and here we are headed into another weekend, but not before. We have a great podcast for you here on Friday mornings, all day Friday, and it'll be up forever, right? So here we are on another Friday, and Fridays mean a long-form conversation with somebody, usually a lot of people from my alma mater, Rio Hondo Prep, because they've gone into and done so many great things, all throughout the world and everything. But I also have on here a lot of different types of sports officials, because officiating was something that was a very big part of my life. And every time I think of Fridays, I specifically think of Friday Night Lights and working high school football. And I had the opportunity to work high school football for many years, 10, 11 years with the Foothill Citrus Football Officials Association. Got my polo on here with their logo on it. And my experiences there were just, you can't put a price on the memories I made and the relationships I made. We're just a bunch of great people there. And my first really step into officiating, well before I got involved in professional baseball, college baseball, I was a high school football official, and high school basketball and baseball also. But high school footballs were a really cut my teeth. Is that the way, the phrase they say? And I loved it from the very beginning. And I was told basically, you got to get out, you got to watch guys work, you got to ask questions, you got to learn. It's very much on you. And I did that the first few years in Foothill Citrus, and I haven't done it in a while, but I met some amazing people, and I haven't had an official on the podcast in quite some time. So I thought we'd today bring on somebody that is not only a high school football official, also works some college ball, if I'm not mistaken. But he was also in the Los Angeles Police Department for many, many years, worked as a detective, I believe, in homicide. I'll let him fill us in on all those details. But today we're going to be joined by Mr. Paul Mize. He's been long retired from both the LAPD and his officiating days. But right as I was joining Foothill Citrus is when Mr. Mize was kind of at the end of his officiating days. And so I think it was year 2 or 3 of my time there where Paul walked away and enjoyed retirement. But I had a brief interaction with him then. I have stayed in touch a little bit with him since then. And he's one of many guys who've gone through Foothill Citrus that I truly do cherish the brief moments I had to work with them, learn about them, learn from them. So Paul Mize is our guest today. And I've had a few different Foothill Citrus football officials on this podcast throughout the past 2 years. I've had Tracy McFate, Luther Wilson, Joe Bernansky, Scott Root, Danny Cortez, so many great guys that I have had the privilege to work with. Bob Lamb. I mean, I can't say enough about these guys. And so I hope you guys enjoy today's episode of Mr. Paul Mize, because we're not just going to talk officiating. We'll also get into a little bit of maybe how crazy the world has been the past few years, and also his experiences in law enforcement, working for the LAPD, especially being a detective. I'm sure he will have a story or two for us. So I will not waste any more of everyone's time. Let's get to our guest today, our main event. It is my privilege today to be joined by Mr. Paul Mize. Okay, my guest today is someone I've wanted to chat with for quite some time. He has had a great career in law enforcement, spent 35 years with the Los Angeles Police Department, 28 of those years as a detective. He was also a football official in the Foothill Citrus Football Officials Association. That's where we met. A lot of great things to talk about. Can't wait to talk to Mr. Paul Mize. Paul, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Paul, I started Foothill Citrus back in 2007, and you were one of the veteran officials there. I was just starting out as you were kind of finishing up. I think you said in 2009 or 2010. But I would say that so many of the people and the faces, just the, I don't know, you and I would have never probably met had it not been for football officiating. And there's a lot of people I could say that about.
True. Doing what I did, you value your friendships and your relationships with all the cops that I grew up with that mentored me, and guys that worked under me at various jobs that I had. And you get into football, it's the same kind of thing. You develop your friendships, and those guys that really take an interest in you and try to help you. In my case, it was Al Corey. Al Corey was a guy. Now, it was funny that it just dawned on me. Al Corey, my goodness. I worked in a radio car at Newton Street Station, downtown LA. This would be just before the Watts riot in 1965. That'll take us back a bit. But with Al Corey's dad, his father was an LA police officer. And so I worked with him for a couple of months, and had no clue about Al whatsoever. And but I was taking classes at trying to get my AA degree at Mount Sac. And there was a guy sitting there next to me, and we just chit-chatted during breaks. I never, ever said to anybody when I was going to college that I was a police officer. I mean, this was during the Vietnam War, and trust me, anybody in law enforcement was not very popular among those people. So Al had casually mentioned to me about his father being an LA police officer, and I go, ding, ding, ding. I mentioned to him, I can't think of his father's name right now, Don. I said, I knew a Don, Corey, and he said, that was probably my dad. And so we had this friendship that went on through our college, Cal State LA and all that stuff. And we just kind of kept in touch. He caught me as my kids grew, got older, they got involved in junior All-American football. And so here's where I got acquainted with football officiating. I was coaching a team at Cortez Park in West Covina that my boys played on. And the referee for our game was Mr. Al Corey. And so we got to going on that. And he, as my kids evolved and were going into high school, I realized I didn't want to go around and coach somebody else's kids and stuff. So I said, hey, time for me to get out of this. And he offered me, why don't you come and go with me next Tuesday night or Monday night, whatever it was when the meetings were. And we met at Mount Sac then. And so that's how I got into football officiating. I went out there to the meeting, and next thing you know, I'm paying my dues and signing up.
So many guys have that kind of story where they were involved in coaching or something and wanted to kind of stay involved, and officiating kind of, made sense. So we all thought before we got into it, oh, I can do that. That's easy. That's not hard at all. I officiate from my couch every weekend, and I yell at refs. So how hard could it be? What was your first experiences in transitioning to officiating?
But when you're doing the sideline stuff, and I played in high school and in college and stuff, and so I understood a lot about the game, and probably more so than a lot of people. But my philosophy evolved over the years about people involved in coaching was that most coaches know enough about football officiating to be dangerous. Other than that, they know shit about it. They don't understand the philosophy of it. They think we're all out there trying to decide the game, And I had a coach get on my case and ask me, said, how the hell can you make that call? I said, well, I couldn't have made it last week. Why couldn't you have made it last week and you make it this week? Why I wouldn't wear my glasses? And he just flamed out.
Oh my goodness, that is good stuff. I will say, which we'll eventually get to, I've seen a lot of guys who are in law enforcement go into officiating, and really it was very seamless. I always felt like the guys who had experience in law enforcement, it was just second nature to them on the field because of having a presence and taking control and things like that. And instead of dealing with lawlessness or whatever, you're dealing with penalties and enforcement on a football field.
It is kind of I never had a problem with, like you say, we've all worked with officials in games, no matter what sport you're doing, and they're like empty suits out there. I mean, you wonder, is anybody working that sideline over there? What the hell's going on? And but I never had a problem stepping up and having my say, even with with veteran referees. When you get into college football, a lot of these guys don't like to be challenged. And so when I kind of I did follow at Al Corey's footstep. He had told me, if you want to work college football, and I started late. I was 35 or 36 years old, and so I knew I was never going to, even if I'd had the skill, I was never going to go to Division I football. Was never going to happen. Too old. And but sometimes you just have to speak up and let the referees know that this is not the right way to go. I was an umpire. I became an umpire, and umpires probably know more about the rules than the referees themselves. That's why they always want you standing there when they make a call, and so you can go, excuse me, would you like to repeat that, Mr. Referee?
Well, one of my first games, I should say it was my second year, and I had a pretty good first year, got a couple of varsity games, working the flanks. And I remember Tracy, one of those post-game gatherings, of course, said, well, how do you feel about back judge next year? And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, sure. Why not? And I wasn't a lot slimmer then, but I was a little slimmer then. And I remember my very first back judge game was with you. You were the white hat. It was at Wilson High School. And I just wanted to not screw up because it was a new position. I was learning. And then I think after the game, as you weren't much for, for positive feedback, you'll say, but I think you gave me a slap on the back and said, hey, good job. Like, that was about as much for me. I was ecstatic, and I'd still screwed up plenty in that game, but I'll never forget that first experience out there. That was the first time I had worked with you also.
I was, like I say, when I started, and I started in 1975, you didn't get varsity games. We were in 4-man mechanics at varsity and 3-man in the afternoon, and that sort of thing. And so there wasn't, you think about, well, we just didn't need that many officials. And there was like 130 guys, 125, 130 guys. And so your chances of getting a varsity game were slimsky and nunsky. And so we would, I would volunteer to work games because I didn't get any afternoon games either. And so I'd get a hold of a referee at meeting, and I'd say, hey, do you mind having a fourth guy? Well, who the hell wouldn't like to have a little more help on Friday when he's going to go to a varsity game when the game is over? And so I sort of made my game or my name the first couple of years by volunteering and working games for free. It was never about the money for me whatsoever. I'd have paid them to do it. I had so much fun. It was sort of like when I was a young cop on the working a radio car. Some nights it was so much fun. We'd look at one another at midnight or something and say, "What do you mean we got to go home? We're having too much fun." And it was a lot like that with football for me. I enjoyed it, and then you had to go and drink beer and visit with people after, and none of us ever wanted to do that. Drink beer and lie to each other about how good we were.
Yeah. There was no one more critical on a Friday night on officials than other officials afterwards, and hearing the stories and like, you did what? You let what happen in your game? Are you out of your mind? You overwent around for that. Like, that's what made it. I mean, some guys, hey, they worked for free, like you were saying, because they were spending their whole game check. paying taxes, we'll say, for those guys that messed up,
True. I paid more than a few shares of taxes myself. I was always kind of smug, and it's probably a good word, about never having an inadvertent whistle in a game. And I was working a game up at Citrus, and I think it was Claremont and Glendora, and they're coming down to the west end zone, and I was the umpire. Bernansky was the referee, and I see this guy get hit right in the hole. He's got the ball, and down he goes. And so I step up, and I never had my whistle in my mouth. I always used a finger whistle, and I would tell everybody, use a finger whistle, you'll never have an inadvertent whistle. And so what I do, I blow the play dead, and I look over at Joe, and Joe's just standing frozen in his spot. And he takes his head and kind of flops it. If you can see me, went like this. Just kind of flopped his head and looked at me. And then I see the ball bouncing back behind. And of course, it's recovered by the defense. And Joe says, can you do me a favor and please go explain to the Claremont coach why he's not going to get the football?
For those non-officials out there, an inadvertent whistle is, one of the worst things that can happen on a football field. It's blowing the whistle too early when someone fumbles or whatever the case is. And the only thing you can really do with an inadvertent whistle is a do-over. So even though the defense jumped on the fumble, we had a whistle. We have to just do the play over. So Mr. Mize here had to walk over to the coach and tell him, hey, I got bad news and bad news.
It was funny because the coach was a guy, he didn't have much patience anyway. And so all I did was solidify it for him that we were a bunch of clowns. And I must have ate many pounds of bullshit after that for weeks. It came in. They wanted to know, what is it? Well, one of the referees, I don't remember who it was, wanted to know if I brought a whistle to the game. And I said, yeah. And he said, let me see it. And he told me, he said, I'll hang on to this. And when we need you to blow the whistle, I'll give it to you. You can't get upset. The only thing you can do is laugh it off. And hey, I deserve all this grief, because it's like the unpardonable sin.
Yeah.
Blow that whistle.
You need thick skin to be an official, but you need the thick skin to work with your colleagues, and especially those, as we've already talked about, you've said some names, those closest to you, your closest friends are going to ride you the hardest. And most of the time you deserve it. I deserved it. And you're like, okay, this is a way that I can get better, that I have to deal with this until the next guy makes a massive screw up.
There's such a degree of camaraderie with football officials that I found. And I didn't work any other sports, but I can imagine it's probably similar in baseball and in basketball. But you get to know the other officials working these games, because you don't work with the same guys all the time. So you've got to learn how to get along and to mesh as a crew. And I worked college games where you'd go out and it'd be 7 of you, and sometimes the referee can get people so upset before a game. Oftentimes you want to just say, I think I'll just pass on this and go to the parking lot.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I remember that in working my first few college games. It's like, you're kind of making everybody nervous before we even set foot on the field. Can we just, hey, first of all, my name's Matt, by the way, can we have that conversation first? But I remember my first few varsity games. I said, I worked with you. Every time for me as a young guy, it was like, this is my first game with Paul Mize. This is my first game with Tracy McFay. This is my first game with Joe Bernansky, Scott Root. And so there was a hunger there. I think I was at the very end of kind of when you needed to do a lot of that volunteer work you talked about. And just one of the first things they told us, hey, you got to go out and watch a game every Friday night. I was like, really? Okay. I'm all about that. And so unfortunately nowadays, Paul, I know you've been retired for quite some time. I've been out a few years. There's such a shortage of officials that guys are getting thrown into varsity games, not just before they're not ready, but before they've even put any real work in. They're just like, well, we need bodies, so we need you out there.
I think they'd be better off to cut back and go to 4-man mechanics than to put people out there that are not really qualified to be there. They can get you in more trouble than they're worth. It seems to me like, there's so much negative stuff that goes on. It seemed to me like through most of the years that I did it, the people that went to the games, they're going to get on your case. That's just part of it. But you know what it's like being a home plate umpire and you're not having your best game, and they're just blowing your doors off from behind, and so it's the same with football. You got to be on your toes all the time, and if you make a mistake, own up to it, don't lie about it. I had guys come up say, I had a guy that had an inadvertent whistle, and it was a referee in a playoff game, and we're all stopped and we're looking around, and he goes over and he said, "What was that?" And I said, "You blew your whistle." And he said, "No, I didn't blow my whistle." And we're all looking at him. We knew it was him, and he never admitted that he did it. And it was kind of funny because he'd been around about 20 years, and it was kind of a better than average official, and he never refereed another game. The guys that did the assigning and stuff like that, they just cut them off at the knees. I was going to tell you, I worked a game up at Claremont College, and the referee was an Orange County guy. He was kind of a hot shot that was looking to go in the Pac-10 or the Pac-12 now, but he comes in and he just started yipping on people. And I'd worked with him before, and didn't like him. When I saw his name was on the roster, I said, "Well, this isn't going to be fun." And so we get there, and during the pregame, he started going on, and I've always had a thing about people calling me Paulie. And there's very few people that I've ever let get away with calling me Paulie. And so he started in by calling me Paulie, knowing full well, and I'd talked to him before about it, and he was like putting on his aggressive face. And so I said, "Can I talk to you a minute?" And he said, "About what?" I said, "I need to talk to you right now." And so we stepped up and walked outside, and I said, "Hey, listen, there's probably only 3 people in my life that I've ever let call me Paulie, and they're good friends of mine. That ain't you. If you do it again, I don't care if we're standing in the middle of the field, I'm going to knock you on your ass." Now, not the best way to start the game, but we actually got to be fairly good friends later on. But sometimes you just got to stand up for yourself.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, that's the name of the game, really. And I may or may not have heard another, we'll say, version of that story, but we'll leave it at that. Paulie. Yeah, I don't like people calling me Buddy. I don't know what it is, Buddy, Bud, or I'm like, come on. Or
I got a dog named Buddy, pal.
That's great. Oh my goodness, so many great stories, great memories, of course, with football. And Tracy and I have been very close over the years. Not only was he the assigner, it's nice to make friends with the assigner, but it was beyond that. I think we met at Glenkirk Church, just ran into each other when I started football, and I think you were going there a short time too, weren't you, Paul? Or no?
We've attended there since 1992.
Wow.
We've been members there for a long, long time. Although I have to qualify that we haven't been in that church in 2 years. All I do is mail them my tithe. We watch it on television because they're talking about reopening it up. But if they do, then you still got to sit 6 feet away from you. Can't sit with your wife and stuff like that. Said no, when they open it up where it's regular, it will go back.
Yeah. Oh man, God bless you. That's awesome. Yeah, we started going there a while. I haven't been in a long time, but I remember I was looking for new churches, and we went there right in Glendora, and it was like, hey, there's Tracy, there's Paul Mize, and yeah, I definitely like my experiences there. Tracy mentioned to me, his brother, Tom, was a big part of Foothill Citrus, and I know you guys were pretty close, and we now have an award in the Foothill Citrus unit that is called the Tom McFate Award that's presented to an official every year, and it's it's quite priceless. What can you tell me about your relationship with Tom McFate and the McFate family, I guess?
Well, I got to know the whole family really well, actually. The old man was a joy, an absolute joy to be around. He could cut right through the chafe and nail something right on the head. He was just a good guy. But I got to know Tom. I worked with him on a varsity game when we were in four-man mechanics, and I think it was probably my first year or second year working varsity. So I'd been around about 5 or 7 years, but he was just somebody that I saw sitting over on the side that were the instructors and that kind of thing. And, so I never talked to him other than working a game. We worked a game at La Puente High School, and we go out to do the coin toss. And Tom says, "Do you have a coin?" I said, "No." And he said, "I forgot my coin." I said, "What the hell are you going to do? Have him out here and go, paper and scissors and rock?" And he says, "No." And believe it or not, he called him out, and he said, "We're trying something new this year. And so what we're going to do is I want you to pick you're the visitor. So I want you to pick a number between 1 and 5. Almost fainted. And the guy did. Nobody knew the difference, but he and I.
And the kids, oh, this is cool.
And I know he talked to me after the game. He said, "I'd rather you not tell that story to anybody at pizza tonight when we get up there." And I said, "Oh, you can count on me. Oh yeah, you can count on me." I wasn't through the door before you guys aren't going to believe what the hell happened.
That sums up the officiating brethren so much right there. Oh yeah, no problem. Oh, your secret's safe with me. Hey guys, listen.
Well, what is it? Football officials are a lot like cops. They'll talk about everything. They'll talk about your mama even. And they'll do it all in a way that you won't be offended about it, even though you just got shredded.
I'll tell you this, I've officiated a lot of different sports and levels and everything, but there's something. High school football was just the most special time. I've been all over the country working college and professional baseball, but high school football, Friday nights, about 5:30 until, we won't say when, the nights went late sometimes. Those were just the best. They were the fastest 10 or 11 Friday nights of the year. And there was just nothing like it. And the relationships, Tom McFate, we mentioned, Big Joe Bernansky, you talked about Al Corey, who was the instructional chairman many years and worked in Division I for a long time. If you had to sum up your experiences with Foothill Citrus, Paul, and I wear this shirt proudly with the logo on it, what would you say you remember most from working for the Foothill Citrus Football Officials Association?
Probably how close they were when it got down to the beginning of the year. Now there was groups of us, like Jimmy Axton was in this stuff, and another guy that went to Glenkirk. Jimmy Axton's the guy that got me going back to church. I played golf with him, and he would always ask me at the end of a round of golf. He'd say, "You want to meet me for church tomorrow?" And he never did not ask. And we played together for probably 15 years. And he'd ask me that knowing full well that I was going to say no. And I was going through a really rough time. And he asked me and caught me just perfect. And I said, "Yeah, give me the address. I'll see you in the morning." And he told me later, he said, he almost didn't know how to give me the directions to Glenkirk. I showed up and went to church, and the next week I talked my wife into going. We went up and we stayed there ever since. But to make a point, the people would it wasn't a a time thing, like, well, football's coming on in September, so let's get together in August and go over the rules. A lot of us did this year round. Going back to Tom McFate, Tom lived this stuff, and he had a good job. He worked for, I think, Edison, but it was not uncommon to have the phone ring at 11 o'clock. Now, I was a homicide detective, and so I was used to my phone ringing at all hours. But I'd pick up the phone thinking it's some watch commander at the station telling me they got a body in the roadway, and it's Tom. Says, Paul, we're talking like February now. Season's been over for 2 months, and he's calling. I was thinking about this play, and he's going over this thing, and I'd be on the phone with him for an hour. I'd call Tracy the next morning and I'd say, what the hell's going on with Tom? And he said, when did he call you? And so I told him, he said, I just spent an hour with him before you did. But the guys that I knew when I started, there was a big bunch of them that were like that. They loved talking the sport and stuff, and our wives knew one another, and we'd go to dinner now and then, and well, because somebody better get that phone. Hello, Ray. Love the phone.
Okay.
Anyhow, but I think the guys that I knew were like my best friends. I was more friends with the guys in football than I was my cop friends. And one thing about cops is they get clannish. I mean, they only hang around with themselves, and you can get really a jaded view of the world when you start hanging around with a bunch of cops. Now, I had 33 homicide detectives that worked for me, and it was not uncommon to be out 72 hours straight on some case, no sleep, no nothing. And these guys were like your lifeline, your friends, but they have some really twisted views over the years about things. And I was determined not to get trapped into that. And I kind of fed on the Foothill citrus thing. And so even now that I'm retired, I still talk now and then to cop friends, but not as much as I do with guys that I did football with or guys that I play golf with. And they're probably not even in law enforcement. So it's just like a family. Probably
What's interesting is you explain it like it's almost like guys needed an outlet kind of to get away from law enforcement. Yet you went into something that was not as serious, but similar to it. Whereas maybe other guys, golf wasn't enough or some other hobby wasn't enough, but it seemed like football officiating was just right, just what you needed to kind of break away.
Coach Murphy down at Cal State Fullerton told me one day, he said, just before the kickoff, I come up the sideline and just introduced myself to him. And he says, Paul, I heard you were an LA cop. And I said, it's true. And he looked at me and he said, and you went into football officiating? He said, what, you just don't like being liked? I grew up on a farm in Colorado.
Really?
So I came to California when I was 17. I had just graduated from high school in beautiful downtown Pueblo, Colorado, which is about 100,000 in southern Colorado.
What brought you out to California?
My mom and dad.
Ah,
I was 17, and in those days, in the late 50s, early 60s, you couldn't do anything unless you're 21. Mom and dad still had the hook on you. You couldn't join the military. You couldn't do anything. I really wanted to go to one of the service academies when I was in high school, and that was my brass ring. And so I went to work trying to attain that. Worked very, very hard at it. And when they were handing out the invitations, I didn't hear my name, so my feelings were a little bit dashed. And but I get a call, well, actually by my English teacher, who was sort of my mentor. She calls me and she says, Paul, I have an offer for you to attend the Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. And which was a place that actually Pete Gotro went for, I think, 1 year
No
when he
kidding.
got out of high school. Yeah. But I thought, wow, that's really cool. Yes. And so the guy from Coast Guard came to the house and made the presentation. He had all these official-like documents for my mom and dad to approve it. And my dad looked at me. And my father was a minister. And so he looked at me and he said, your mom and I have talked about this. We've prayed about it. And we just don't think this is a good move for you. And so I'm not going to sign for you. I was crushed. And then he tells me, he said, one day you'll thank me for it. And this is the tag to the story. My father died when he was 87. I do not recall me ever thanking him.
Oh.
My dad came out here and took a church. And so we kept following along after him. And I had to get set up to go to school. And my dad even thought this would really be a good deal. So he took me up to Pasadena Nazarene College, and to where my dad did his undergrad. And he said, I'm going to take you up here and show you around and everything. We'll get you signed in. And because my brother went in the Marine Corps, and so my dad was going to make damn sure that I followed in his footsteps. He had followed in his grandfather's footsteps, and his grandfather had followed in his father's footsteps. And Paul Mize was surely going to be the next minister in the family. And I remember telling my mom, this is not me. There is nobody sitting on my shoulder calling me to be a minister. And it was a tough time for my dad. But I always wanted to be an LA cop. And I got into that. It sounds ringy, but I was, we only had one television channel in my town when I grew up, and we would get Dragnet. And so I watched that and I was thoroughly enthralled with it.
Okay.
Loved it. And so I got into that. My wife and I got married. I was 20. And so I had to find something to do. I was a machinist. So I'm going to school at night, machinist in the daytime, and saw the thing where LAPD was hiring. And so I went down and took the tests and everything. And I was stunned when they hired me. I was 21 years old, never been in the military. And I go down to the police academy the first day, and there was me and another guy that were 20, and we were 21. Everybody else was like 25, 26, and had been in the military. Some of them had been at Vietnam, and so I was like a I don't know, a bubble just waiting to pop. And it was difficult for me to get through the academy. I did okay in the books and the physical part of it, but we talked about this before about your mannerisms and your presence. I did not have the presence of a cop.
Wow.
And I would very baby faced. Oh my God! I see pictures of me when I graduated from the academy. I looked like I was 12, and it was a tough time, but it was what I wanted to do. And then, like I said once before, as I went through it, I just I couldn't believe they paid me for it. And they didn't pay me much, I'll tell you that. I was thinking about this coming up. I made $575 a month, and what's that work out to? About $7,000 a year,
Yeah, something like that.
That's what I made.
Wow.
That's why my wife had to work.
Yeah. I'm chasing the dream. I love the dream, but yeah, sorry,
Well,
honey,
I'm
we need you
starving to
still.
death, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it is interesting that it didn't sound like I don't know. In some, I've heard from a few different officers these days that I don't know, standards have been lowered a little bit, but you, it sounds like you had to step your game up to achieve what you wanted to do. No one was going to hold your hand and be like, "Oh, we're sorry, you're having a tough time." So did
Oh,
it kind of, you were 21 at the time, but did it grow you up pretty fast?
oh yeah. When I went through the first day that we were all lined up on the at the police academy downtown, the they gave us the regular spiel and everything, but we weren't sworn in yet. And so they took us all upstairs, and there was a big PT instructor up there by the name of Bob Smithson. And when he walked in the room, it seemed like all the light left the room because he was huge. He walks he walks in and he says, "I got some photographs I need you guys to view and pass around, and then as you see them, I want you to leave the room and go outside and contemplate what you've just viewed, and then we'll come back in and we'll do the swearing in ceremony." And so when the pictures come around, they're 8 by 10 blow-ups of three dead police officers. And and here you're looking at guys that were killed in the line of duty. One of them was the onion field thing, and the other one was two detectives from Wilshire Station that tried to arrest a forgery suspect in Sears, and he killed them both. So here you're looking at three dead police officers in there, one in his uniform and the other two in suits and ties, and you see bullet holes in their faces and things. And I mean, I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, I'd seen dead animals on the farm and stuff like that, nothing like this. And so when they got done, there was 84 of us that first day, and when we went to swear in, there was 77. The other guys left and said, "Not, can't do that." And I remember thinking about it later. I said, "Well, I had quit my job, come down. I had a young son that had been born, and so I needed the job. There was no way I was going away." And so I stayed in there, and I found a niche and a groove in it. And a couple of the instructors, they didn't make it easy for me, but they seemed to be there to try to mentor me through. And that I'd never fired a handgun, never fired a handgun, and so I had trouble with that. And eventually, you had to be able to shoot at least sharpshooter to get out of it to graduate. And I about 2 weeks before we graduated, I finally shot it. And then the tag story to this is my wife was a deputy sheriff and she was an expert with a gun. So if we ever have trouble around the house, I give her the gun, I guess.
Yeah. That's really funny. Now, did she get into law enforcement before you or same time, or how did that work?
No, I think Reba went into the sheriff's academy at about, I think she was like 27 years old. Uh, Very proud of her. She had a great career. She was a detective at City Industry Station. Uh, One of the first women in the history of law enforcement to be given a Medal of Valor.
Wow.
And they
That
don't
is
give those,
incredible.
they don't give those away with with Cracker Jacks.
No,
So
that's
so the whole family's proud of her. She was a good cop and a very good lady. The nice thing about it is she had a heart. There's a lot of women that go into law enforcement are very hard people, but Reba never lost her humanity, and and I guess that's why we've been married almost 61 years now.
Absolutely. God bless you both. Can you add on to that right there, what you just kind of mentioned, Paul, about, I've been friends with a lot of police officers, young and old, and my grandfather was a police officer, and my dad always told me, and other people, there is you use the word hardened, and the job itself, to have kind of that pressure and kind of that head on a swivel, just that alertness all the time. What is it so much that weighs on cops, police officers, law enforcement? What is it that kind of makes them, I don't know, different people, and just, the effects of.
You're always, one of the first things that I learned was to be very aware of my presence, where I was. And worst thing you can have happen is to get out. There's a famous case down in Los Angeles. Two officers saw a guy walking in they were up in Baldwin Hills, and beautiful homes up in there. And so they saw this guy walking in the middle of the night. So they stopped their car and get out to find out if he lived in the area, just to talk to him. And as they approached him, the guy pulls out a gun and shoots them both. And he seriously wounded Martinez. Well, Skebby gets back to his car, and the guy runs away. He got shot up and wound up. They found him down the street dead. But Skebby's in the front seat of the car. He puts out a call for help, and they asked him where he was, and he didn't know. And they were not in their normal patrol district. And so cars are running all around trying to find him and everything. He bled to death in the front seat of his car. And so to this day, I find myself making sure I know where I am. And the other thing, my wife will the first one to tell you this, I still never sit with my back to the door. I don't carry a gun. I've never carried a gun since I retired. And but I will not sit with my back to the door and have somebody coming in behind me.
Yeah, that seems to be a constant thing with guys. And it's a great, even if you're not in law enforcement, those are great ideas for all of us. Like, hey, what are these street names? Okay, just in case, I don't know. We were so glued to our phones and GPS now that we do lose track of our surroundings.
You need to know where you are, what your surroundings are. And there are some places that you go into. I remember my wife and I were in our motorhome years ago, and we drove into Washington, D.C. And I told my wife, I said, I'm getting a little low on gas. I could look for a gas station and fill up. And this is before we were going to find a campground to stay. And I pulled into this gas station, and I get the hose out, and I got it in. This guy comes out, and he's a black guy. He comes up to me and he says, "Where are you from?" I said, "California." "Why?" And he said, "Do you know where you are?" I said, "Washington, D.C." And he said, "Well, you're in the wrong part of Washington, D.C. for your face." And he said, "I suggest that you turn that thing off and get out of here."
Whoa.
Okay. And that'll get your blood going. And it's hard for me to understand that there are places that just because of what you look like, you cannot go into. And I had all the years that I worked downtown, I spent a lot of time. I ran the homicide unit at 77th Street Station. And we'd do somewhere between 120 and 160 murders every year. And so I was always very comfortable with two things. I could walk past any dog. I never got bit by a cur dog. I'd walk past them. The dogs knew I wasn't afraid of them, and there was no need for them to be afraid of me. And I never felt that I needed to be fearful of walking in the Black community. Most of them, as we're younger, we get bumps on our head by being stupid. And what is it? My dad told me, he said, "Stupid should bring pain." So when you're stupid, you should get pain. And so a lot of stuff that cops get into and stuff is their own creation. I did it, and I saw it done by a lot of guys. Go down and pop off at the wrong guy, and not everybody's afraid of cops, and not everybody likes cops, but we all need us. We all need cops.
100%. And you were not in you were not in some, I don't know, Beverly Hills area. You were in LA, and there's plenty of crime, plenty of murders, as you mentioned, unfortunately. What was it that to kind of piggyback off what you said, what was it that kind of brought you to where you were in the sense of, you know, you knew you could be around anybody, talk to anybody. You made mistakes, of course, but was it just experience, or is it just kind of taking everything you had learned over the years into practice?
It was all of the above. I mean, I think a lot of it is as you mature, you learn how to talk to people, and there's posturing that you make. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that when I saw 3 or 4 gang members standing on a street corner that it didn't get my hackles up a little bit. But I mean, of course you're wary of them, but I never wanted them to, you know, what's the old movie thing? I never wanted them to see me sweat. You know, it was not out of character for me to walk up and walk right between them. I never would walk around them. And over the years, I got to be pretty well known in South Los Angeles. And the homicide unit that I worked in, we handled all the murders from the Santa Monica Freeway all the way south to the Port of Los Angeles.
Wow.
So it encompassed about just short of 1 million people, and we would do 460 murders down there. That's a lot of carnage, and those are just the ones that died, not the other ones that got all shot up. So it was right when the rock cocaine and all that stuff took off, and so you had different gangs vying for the power of it. It was really a tough time. I got a phone call the other day from a young lady that is working the homicide division that I retired from. It's called South Bureau Homicide Division, and when I was there, we had 88 detectives. And she said, well, yeah, we're down here and we have 46 of us. And I said, God, how many murders are you doing? She said, well, last year we did 54 in this particular unit that she was in. And I said, how many did the whole division handle? She said, 270. And it's really quieted down a lot, which is good.
Wow.
We were going hucklebuck all the time. It's not uncommon to have, I did a weekend one time, and I was still working cases, and I handled 8 separate murder cases that weekend. It was like I'd go from one to the next, and then tell us that keep laying flares down. I'll be there as soon as I can. And you know, it was nuts. It was nuts.
Paul, how did you get? Well, I mean, I guess I know how you get involved in homicide, but what made you, number one, pursue being a detective and then wind up in homicide? I think you said 28 years of being a homicide detective. How did all that come about, and how did you know that that's what you wanted to be involved in? Because it's like you said, it's kind of a gruesome area.
It you know, I like everybody else, when you go into a detective bureau, a division, you go in and they give you an assignment. And I worked crimes against persons, so I was handling assaults and batteries and domestic violence and stuff like that, and it was really boring to me to do. And so I catch myself going over into the homicide squad room and sit down and chit chat with these guys and look at the books and stuff. And basically, I was trying to kiss up to somebody when they had a vacancy that they would hire me in. And my problem was my rank. I was what they called a dual right sergeant. I got pissed off. I got the detective bureau pissed off at me. They could put me back in my uniform, and but I could also work in detectives. And so I trying to be as easygoing as I could. Well, we had a whole bunch of murders one weekend, and they called and wanted to know if I would come in and partner up with somebody. And I said, sure. I went in and I started working the case and learned how to do the crime scene itself. It's really quite a process. And I was just thoroughly taken over by it. I did it so much and enjoyed it so much. I wrote manuals for how to do it for the department, and all of all of the different homicide units within the city. And at the time, there was like 18 of them. They all wound up having to use that manual on how to do it, to the point that I was loaned several occasions to the United States State Department. And they sent me to places like Belgium, beautiful downtown Rwanda in Africa, Bulgaria, Switzerland, and stuff like this. And I'd go do seminars on how to conduct a crime scene investigation. And so at the time that I retired, most of the books and stuff that dealt with crime scene investigations, and it's kind of how-to stuff, was stuff based on my manuals that I had written. So I was pretty proud of that stuff. I still got some of that stuff, even, believe it or not. My youngest son went off into law enforcement. He unfortunately couldn't get hired on LAPD. He was had blonde hair and blue eyes, and trying to get on down there was not going to work. So he wound up going to work in Westminster. And after he made sergeant and stuff, and he called me one day, and this was during the Rodney King riot thing. He calls me and he says, guess who just got assigned to homicide? I said, what do you guys have, one a year?
Yeah.
And he kind of chuckled. He said, we've already had 13.
Whoa.
So they had the Vietnamese gangs down there. So it was kind of fun, because he would call me and ask me, how do you do this?
Well, I have a question about that. Like, how do you do that? How do you, for so many years, get up and go to work every day, knowing that you're going to probably see pictures of bodies, you're going to probably see bodies in person, you're going to have to try to put the pieces together, put the pieces of the puzzle to figure out what happened. I mean, to do something that long, do you ever get used to it, or is it something that just you carry with you and you find ways to deal with it?
I'll tell you the way it was put to me. I worked with an old timer that had worked murders for 25, 30 years when I started working with him. And Jack told me, he said, when the first time I had to go to an autopsy, and if you handle a murder, you have to attend his autopsy. And the reason to do so is because if they recover a slug or a broken off knife blade or something inside the body, it's given to you, because you have to keep a log on the evidence. Who recovered it? Who's got it now? So everybody knows where this thing is. So the chain of custody. And so we walked into the coroner's office, and you can smell it right away. He goes, "Oh, this is not good." And he told me, he said, one thing to remember, and do not forget this: never, ever, ever look at a dead body as though it's a human being. And I said, how do you not look at it? He said, it's evidence. It's evidence. Remember that. If you start thinking about this as a human being, and you're going to go in here in a minute and they're going to take the skull cap off of this guy's head and remove his brain in front of you, or they're going to remove his lungs and liver and all this stuff out of his body cavity, and you're going to be standing here watching him do that, it won't take long before you're going to have hobgoblins jumping around in your head. You can't do it. So I've used the same philosophy to other young people that came in and worked for me. It's evidence. Don't look at it like a body. And so I probably attended close to 5,000 autopsies in my lifetime. And some of them are tough to deal with, in kids, women that have been raped and mutilated. Those used to just drive me nuts. I just did a thing on a serial murderer that worked down in LA. God, I can't think of his name right now. God, it's awful getting old. But one of the television channels that called me and said they're doing something on the, they call this guy was the Grim Sleeper, was the guy. And it turned out that we're looking for this guy. He was strangling prostitutes and leaving them in alleys covered up with trash and stuff. And nobody would even know they were missing until they started to smell from decay. And so we're, this goes on for like 10, 12 years, and we're picking up these bodies. And finally, the cases were, we didn't solve one of them, but I was on all of them but two. And when they called and asked me about it, I said, "Did you hear about the guy?" I knew the guy who had been discovered, and it turned out he was a garage attendant at the 77th Street Police Station. And he, I don't know what he got out of that, but he just had this thing about prostitutes. Now he'd go and and get laid and do all that stuff, but then he'd strangle them. And so they got this guy, and they asked me to come down and talk about it. I said, I don't know what I would talk about. What I'm going to do? I'm going to come down and tell you that I went down and picked up a decomp body. And so I went down and did about a 3-hour interview with him. And I saw it on television the other night. And the guy, they get the guy arrested. He goes to court, gets convicted of like 11 counts of murder. They give him the death penalty. He dies in his cell 3 months after, or 9 months after he goes to San Quentin.
Wow.
So go figure.
Yeah, go figure. Indeed. Who knows? These days he might have been let out, just made bail probably for we have too many criminals in prison or something. Anyway, well, let me you mentioned kind of a famous case there, Paul. LA has no shortage of murders and I don't know, not celebrities, but just there's a lot of famous cases, we'll say, in throughout Los Angeles. Have there been any you've been a part of that you can talk about, or anything that might be
I can talk about most cases that I was involved in, and I'll say this: I was never the primary in any of the big time cases. I was for about 6 hours. I was listed. My partner and I were listed as the primaries on Bobby Kennedy.
Wow.
We happened to be driving down Wilshire Boulevard when that whole thing went down, and so they were looking for any detectives in the vicinity to do so. And so we hopped out and ran in. And in fact, Kennedy was still alive, was still talking when we got in there, and they were trying to administer to him and stuff. And Sirhan was thoroughly getting his ass whipped. But that was taken over by the detectives from Robbery Homicide downtown. But I worked on the Hillside Strangler case. One of the things that I always was known for was organizational skills. Now that can be a real crippler to somebody trying to promote or do something, because they don't want to let you go. They want to assign you to a task force, and then like in my case, they would assign me to catalog clues. So you'd get the phone calls coming in about, well, hey, I know about this guy and this guy, and so I had to assign a number to it, get the clue out to some detective, and then make sure that I got it back, and then kept a log on everything. So I did that on the Hillside Strangler. Who the hell was that idiot, the Mexican guy? I probably did 3 or 4 of those things. And
Ramirez?
there was one that was really kind of weird to me, is that I got a call when I was on probation, I think, and on the job, and we got a call to go to the downtown library. And so we go over there, and they take us around and show us there's a guy laying against the wall by the library, and he had just been gutted. I mean, somebody had got a knife into his belly and just split him open. And so about 2 weeks later, we get another one down on Skid Row, same thing. And so I kept wondering in my mind, wonder what happened to that case? What happened to that case? Nothing happened to it. And maybe 10, 12 years later, boom, we get one. And I'm working murders now, and here I'm, what the hell? This looks like 2 cases I was involved in 1964. And sure enough, turned out to be this guy had the reason there hadn't been any more gone. He got arrested and went to prison. And now he'd gotten out and started over again, and his name was Lonnie Franklin. I think that was it. And we arrested him in Hollywood, up in Hollywood. But by then he'd already done 7, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So,
Jeez.
guys, people that kill people are different people, different.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. I mean, you think of, they're monsters and all that, but yeah, they're just, it's crazy to think about it. And
I'll give
go
you
ahead.
one thing that would just drive me crazy. You go out and you have a murder occur. Everybody knows who did it, but the community doesn't want to tell you. The family of the victim won't tell you. And the reason, they didn't want anybody to think they were a snitch.
Oh man.
Now, wrap your head around that one. We had a body turn up one morning and said, Paul, you got to come out and look at this. And so you drive in, go out, and here's a guy hanging in a tree, and he's got a regular old Western noose around his neck, and here he is hanging in a tree. I said, what the hell happened? And found out that it took a couple of days to get this all sorted out. This guy was a terror in the neighborhood, and he'd go to the door and he'd say, I need $500 or something's going to happen to your house tonight. Of course, they'd get off the yard. And so he'd go and set fire to the front porch of their house. And so this got around the neighborhood, but nobody wanted to turn him in because they knew the guy was certifiably nuts. And so the neighbors all got together one night and said, we've had enough of this. And apparently they went out and snatched this guy and hung him. And I remember my captain asked me about it. Said, what are you doing on the guy that was hanging in the tree? I said, we cut him down. And he said, no, I mean, are we going to solve this thing or not? I said, oh, it's solved. And he said, is somebody going to go to jail? And I said, no, nobody's ever going to go to jail in that case on my watch. I'm not going to do it. And a couple of years later, after he had retired, I explained it to him.
Man, that's old school vengeance, I guess, back in the Wild West.
The neighbors hung them.
That is crazy. Oh my goodness. You mentioned a lot of there were some famous cases here in LA. I didn't realize you were at the, one among the first on scene for the RFK assassination. That's crazy. I got to ask, Hollywood and LA, there's always TV shows and movies that portray police and detectives. You said you loved Dragnet as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Now as a veteran officer, detective, retired, are there shows and movies that you just roll your eyes over? Like, that's not even close. And also, are there shows and movies that you're like, wow, that's pretty close?
There's two of them that there's 2 shows. And I don't know whether you've ever read the books and stuff. I think Connolly is the guy that writes the Bosch books.
Yes, yes.
When I started watching the movies that they made, and I mean they had literally taken the Hollywood detective squadron and duplicated it in that it's exact. If you walk in there, it's exactly that way. The procedures that he used were exactly what happens. They give him a lot of latitude with some of the individual stuff he does, because if you try to play cowboy stuff and you're working a homicide unit or a robbery unit, they'll cut your legs off. No, this is a partnership. We do stuff together. We don't send somebody out to go and arrest somebody or follow somebody by themselves. That don't happen. But I get a bang out of watching Blue Bloods.
Okay.
I laughed my butt off. I told him, I said, that the guy that plays the detective, he'd be dragged out behind a squad, behind a detective division, and have his ass kicked. The stuff that he pulls off. But yeah, I get a bang out of some of it, but most of it is just pure Hollywood.
Yeah, for sure. My good buddy Bill Barnes, who was a homicide detective, I think for Riverside, or was for Riverside PD. He loved and raved about that show. He's like, man, this is exactly how it is, and he said how great it was. I've heard multiple cops talk about Bosch, and yeah, I love that show for sure.
Well, you know,
Uh,
the guy Connolly practically lives at Hollywood Station.
yeah,
I
I heard
mean,
that.
he walks in and out of there, and I mean, they treat him like he's God, and he's made them very famous also. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
two-way street.
oh definitely. And you touched on it earlier, Paul, just kind of like your relations with community and maybe gang members, criminals, just civilians, whatever. That it was pretty good, and there was other cops as well. What have you made? You've been out, you retired a while, but what have you made over the past few years and kind of the relationship with police, specifically here in Southern California, but everywhere around the country? As you mentioned earlier, we need cops, we need police. This idea to me of defunding the police, and that is just nonsense. It's a catchphrase. But what would you make of kind of the relationship with the society and police the past couple of years?
In a lot in my time in law enforcement, it always seemed to me like we were our own worst enemies in a lot of cases. We do some pretty stupid things, and I'll say this to preface what I'm going to follow up with is I don't know that anyone that I've ever known ever did anything with a malicious intent. I mean that they were going out to maliciously hurt someone or to shoot people. But I we have a there's a room up at the police academy, and I don't know what the acronym stands for, but they call it the FATS FATS simulator. And what it is you can walk in there and they'll give you a gun, and then right behind you, all of a sudden you realize you're in the middle of it's like a three-dimensional quality to it. And you're standing in there, and here people come running in, and it's a robbery. And you're in the middle of it. Now, what are you going to do?
Mm.
And they brought DAs, public defenders, judges, and all kinds of people up to give them an idea what it was like to be in these situations. And they almost exclusively, these guys blew the hell out of everybody. And their contention was, well, we're not trained police officers, and so they kind of discounted the whole idea of them being there. But things happen so fast. There's a policewoman in Hollywood division that's just being roasted now. I mean, there's things on the internet on her. I've seen them half a dozen times where they show her. She's got a gun on a guy's a Hispanic guy, and he's got a big knife. I mean, a big one, like something you'd cut bread with or something. And he's standing in the middle. He gets out of a car that they'd chased him for a while. He wrecks the car, gets out of the car, and now he's got this big butcher knife, and he's advancing towards her. And she gets out of the car, and she's got her little camera on, so you can hear her talk to him and see him walking, and you can clearly see the knife. But he's about maybe 30, 40 feet away from her, advancing at a steady pace. And next thing, as she's telling him, drop that knife, and he doesn't do it. And here he comes, but he's got a purpose on his face. And so she capped him and killed him. And of course, the shit hit the fan over the deal that he was no danger to her. Well, I have a series of photographs that I used when I taught at the police academy that is of an officer who waited one step too long, and he has got cuts that go all the way to the bone, all over his back and his chest and his abdomen and everything. And surprisingly, he lived through this thing. But I think the number was something like 200 and some odd stitches put in him to put him back together. And he just waited one step too long. People move really quick. And the average law enforcement shooting when I was on the job was within about 7 yards. That's pretty close. And I don't, the guys now, I could not be a cop today. The way I was trained and developed emotionally and into my adulthood as a police officer, I couldn't take the grief that they're taking now. I couldn't do it. I'd have to leave the job or I'd wind up being in jail. They put so much onto them. What's the deal now? They want them to have they want to hire people like psychologists to come out and help them deal with people. We had psychologists before. They'd ride around with a sergeant, and if they had some domestic violence thing, come out there and they'd bring this lady or man over onto the call, and chances are it was going to wind up into a brawl anyway. I don't know that they ever helped. And after a couple of years, the city defunded it. But these guys have a exceedingly difficult job.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the Times a couple of days ago was an article in there that they'd announced in October that they were going to have an academy class in January, and they couldn't hire enough people to even have a class. And
you got to be careful what we wish for. Yeah, I mean, we need police, everybody. We need it. You may be mad at them writing you a ticket or something, but we need the police. We've needed them a long time, and there's not really any better options. Social workers showing up to domestic violence dispute probably aren't going to do too much.
They're going to want to talk their little game thing, and whoever the party that feels they've been aggrieved, they don't want to hear that stuff. They want something done for them.
Yeah. Well, Paul, much like I asked about football officiating, I want to ask you about your career in law enforcement. You've seen a lot, experienced a lot of bad days, but a lot of good days, I'm sure, too. Solving cases had to be a nice feeling at times. How would you sum up your entire career in law enforcement and looking back?
Probably the best 35 years of my life. I always felt that I gave it 110%. My wife will tell you I would write my search warrants and stuff on my cases at home on the kitchen table because I didn't want it to affect my work time at work, and that kind of stuff. So I'm doing my paperwork and stuff at home. One time when I was working on my master's degree, I would sit in the family room, and we got a little table and put in there, had a word processor and stuff, and I'd do my schoolwork and my cop work there at home. I enjoyed every minute of it. There were, of course, bad days and bad weeks, but the memories that I took away from it and the camaraderie that went with it, I'll never forget it. Never.
Well, God bless you, sir, for your service and your wife's service. I mean, two people with so much experience in the field under one roof. And I have one final question for you, Paul, before I let you go. Now that we've talked a lot about a lot of serious stuff here, this is the last one I'll ask you is, after retiring now for quite some time, has the golf game improved at all? With you, are you playing a lot more? How's the golf game? When
3 years ago, I was a 7 handicap. I'm an 18 now, so you figure it out.
Wow.
I was fine at, not to throw a big downer on this thing, but because this happens to a lot of guys, I come down with prostate cancer. And so, next thing you know, you're being set up for surgery, and they're taking some of the better parts of your life away from you. And when they start cutting into your abdomen and stuff, it does things to you physically, where there's no pop in my golf swing anymore. And so I still have fun when I go out and play. I play with the same guys and that I've played with for years. Joe and Joe's down. He can't even swing a club now. He's got a rotator cuff thing. They're talking about doing surgery on him now. But I know Joe. Joe will find some way to get out of that surgery. I've never known a man in my life that is 6'7" and 350 pounds, scared to death of a scalpel.
Big Joe. He was a pleasure.
He came over to our house one day, and because I had told him my wife had bunion surgery on her feet, and he said, "Oh, I need to talk to Reba." So he comes swinging by, and he's talking to her about the about her surgery, and she's telling him, and says, "Man, they made an incision here. I had to get him a chair. He was getting lightheaded."
Big Joe, Mr. Football player, baseball player. What's up, man? Come on.
Yeah.
Freaking Joe. Well, Paul, I can't wait for so many of the Foothill Citrus guys, Tracy, Joe, and all the guys to see this. And this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for doing this. We've talked about it a while. This has been so much fun and honestly informative. And I've learned a lot, and it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you.
Well, I enjoyed it. Keep in touch, pal. You're close enough now.
I know, right up the road.
Yeah,
I know. We're beyond the Facebook likes and shares and everything. And I was like, you know what? I got to get Paul on. We seem pretty like-minded here. So yeah, right up the road.
All right, pal. You thanks a lot.
Thank you, Paul. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Well, I'll say it again after another outstanding, fun interview. That was just so much fun and probably my favorite one I've done here in the past few months. I mean, every time I get a chance to talk to somebody, especially the caliber of person that Paul Mize is, I mean, it's just, I don't know what to say sometimes after that. I thought we talk a little football officiating, which was great, but then to dive into the law enforcement side of things and to hear what guys like him went through for so long, the things they've seen and just their commitment to solving crimes and solving cases. I mean, it really does paint a picture for those of us not involved in law enforcement that we should be eternally grateful for these guys, these men and women who put on the blue uniform. I mean, he mentioned his wife there with one of the first females to receive the Medal of Valor. I mean, what an incredible group of people. And to Paul Mize, thank you for your service, and to your wife, Reba, and thank you, Paul, for your influence in Foothill Citrus football officiating. I didn't get to experience it long, but it's funny. You catch up, you go right where you left off, really. And I know so many Foothill Citrus football officials cherish the memories from Paul and the moments and great times. So thank you very much, Mr. Paul Mize. That was outstanding. Thank you for sharing so much with us. And yes, I do live right up the road from you now, and wouldn't mind seeing you in person very, very soon. Guys, that will wrap up today's show of the Get Home Safe podcast. I will repeat a few things as I usually do at the end of the show. But if you'd like to follow this podcast, you can follow us pretty much anywhere you find podcasts: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you listen to podcasts. You should be able to find Get Home Safe podcast. We're on YouTube as well under Get Home Safe podcast. Our Facebook and Instagram page, same thing, Get Home Safe podcast, and our Twitter handle, Get Home Safe Pod. Those are where you can find us. Give us a follow, rate, review on the platforms, and you should be able to find new episodes popping up here and there. You can watch the podcasts here on YouTube or listen to them just with audio. And usually on Thursdays, I'll put out a picture of our upcoming guests and some information. So that's a good reason to follow us through social media and everything. This podcast will be back on Tuesdays and Fridays is our current format. Just me on Tuesdays, rambling away about sports, current events, my opinions, just the crazy world that is. And then Fridays, much like today, we'll have a guest on, just a face-to-face conversation, just talking about their career, their story, and hopefully a few things that can inspire all of us to take us into the weekend ready to conquer the world. So big thanks again, Paul Mize. Can't say it enough. I will see you very soon. And to everyone else out there, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in. Much love for all of the support. Can't do this without you guys. And I just Yeah, I'm incredibly blessed to do podcasts like this weekly, and I just can't wait to do some more next week. Guys, have a great weekend. And as always, guys, no matter what you're doing, whether you're out on the town or rounding third base, get home safe.